Again, it's my pleasure to introduce Robert Tercek. When I think of the word futurist, Robert comes to mind. He has had an incredible career. I first met Robert in the 90s when he was co-founder with Scott Page and a few other people of one of the pioneering CD-ROM companies, Seventh Level. Prior to that, he also launched MTV Asia as a creative director. He's sort of gone back and forth between, doing great things in traditional media. He was SVP at Sony of Digital Media. He was the president of Oprah Winfrey Network. And then he would kind of go back and forth between, running traditional entertainment businesses and then disrupting them. He also wrote the book Vaporize, which won a lot of awards. And, now he has Nura as a co-founder, which is looking to completely disrupt the film industry as the first Gen AI powered studio. I can't wait to see it. Robert?
Thank you, Michael. Right. Thanks for inviting me here.
Thank you. Hey, folks. Hi, I'm Rob Tercek, and I'm thrilled to be here. I know some of the people in the room were not around earlier today, but the opening session with Eric Collier and Michael was so worthwhile. It was worth getting up early for and coming to. Anytime you get those two guys on a stage together, it's totally worthwhile. And there have been many other great points made by some of the folks who were on previous panels. I'm going to try to pull all that together in this talk, which is about what's happening here in Hollywood, what's happening now and next in Los Angeles and globally in the media business. I believe that generative AI is going to completely reshape the way we make motion pictures and television. As Michael said, I'm committed to that in my business. I raised a whole bunch of money last year to build a motion picture company. We're in the process of building those tools, but I'm not going to talk about that company today. I'm going to talk about the opportunity because this is really for everybody. And of course, because the theme is tokenized, I'm going to try to link all this stuff to the tokenized opportunity. So let's get into it. How do I get these slides to go, man? Oh, that's a bummer. Oh, yeah, there we go. Great. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Getting back into it. So the first point I want to make is Gen AI and artificial intelligence, it's not your enemy. And I say that because this week in town, I don't know if you've been to these events where there's entertainment people are freaking out about artificial intelligence, right? People in Los Angeles right now are terrified of AI. And candidly, for 50 or 60 years, the entertainment industry has been telling us to be fearful, right? Go all the way back to 2001, A Space Odyssey and the HAL 9000 computer, that glowing red eye that we then saw in the Terminator, and then we saw it again in the Matrix. So we've been telling ourselves these scary stories about artificial intelligence, and who's internalized it the most? The media and entertainment industry. They fully believe that AI is going to displace them. I feel differently about it. I launched my company because I wanted to build Gen AI tools that are for artists, that enable artists to make stories. And I truly believe that's going to be the case. I'll show you what I mean by that here. As soon as I figure out how to make this thing work. There we go. Great. So all the issues facing the entertainment industry today can be attributed not to artificial intelligence, but to human stupidity. It is true that Los Angeles is going through a convulsion right now as the media industry collapses. It's a real truth. And production is down. Production is fleeing Los Angeles. The budgets are down. And there's about 40% unemployment for people who work on film crews. So these are real issues right now. None of them are caused by AI. All of them can be attributed to human stupidity. For instance, it was human stupidity, not AI, that decided to abandon or jettison the cable TV business model, which was by far the most profitable, the best way to profit maximize in publishing ever devised for any medium ever. But they walked away from that. It was human stupidity, not AI, that caused Time Warner to skip twice on the opportunity to acquire Netflix when they could. It was human stupidity, not artificial intelligence, that caused the media industry then to chase Netflix and squander billions of dollars building out direct-to-consumer streaming platforms that to this day aren't profitable, and there is no path for profitability for those things. These can all be attributed to human error. AI hasn't really hit the entertainment industry yet, and I think when it comes, it's going to solve some problems. But let's take one step back and say, well, what about the video business? Is it a good business? Is it going down? Is it going to collapse? No, it's an excellent industry. Globally, if you take all video, and I include film in that, so say motion picture, box office, home video, television, broadcast, cable, satellite TV, streaming platforms, SVOD, fast services, also social video. If you take all of that together, it's about $1 trillion market. but success is being redistributed. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in just a second. So the business model for traditional TV is collapsing right now. And it's really driven by two simple facts, two simple numbers that you can verify. I'll share them with you now, but you can check my words. Okay, so the first one is declining revenue for TV across the board. In every category of television, revenue is going down. This has been going on for many years, but it's going to continue. So that's one fact. You're in a business that's in a long-term secular decline, but that's not all. The second problem is that the content cost is going up. And this has also been going on for many years. This goes back to the 1990s. The content cost continues to rise, and there's there seems to be no way to reduce the cost of content creation. So if you're in the media business right now, just like people are business people in this room, you got a situation where revenue isn't covering your costs. Well, you got to either slash your costs or increase your prices. And the media industry decided to do both things. Back in 2023, in October 2023, the motion picture companies and the streaming platforms all decided to raise their prices in the same time, in that month of October 2023. So this is a complicated chart, but the only thing you need to pay attention to is that every streaming platform raised their price at the exact same time. Their feeling was, we've been subsidizing this, we've been growing it, we've been getting users, we've got subscribers now, and they're not going to go anyplace. Well, as a matter of fact, consumers are smart. It's extremely easy to unsubscribe from these services. And so what we saw was a wave of cancelization on a level, it's unprecedented. In cable TV, it was very difficult to unsubscribe. If you called your cable operator, they kept you on the phone for 30 minutes to get you to unsubscribe. But now it's just a click of a button. And so no surprise, just a month after that price hike, this happened. The largest unsubscribe in history. 50 million people unsubscribed from streaming after that price hike just 1 quarter later. Now, these are companies that spend a fortune on customer acquisition just to get a couple million new subscribers each quarter. So to lose 50 million at a shot, that is a big deal. Now, of course, they've been messing around with the prices since this. This was a year and a half ago. They've been tweaking the prices ever since. But what we see is every time the price goes up, people unsubscribe. So we can say that streaming today is priced to perfection. So the next step is to cut cost. Now, the studios aren't very good at this. Actually, the media companies are terrible at cutting cost. Thank you. So a few years back, about 10 years ago, Game of Thrones set a benchmark for the most expensive television production in history at $20 million an episode. Now, that actually made sense. It was a very good show, a lot of locations, a lot of exotic locations, a lot of costumes. So, big cast. It made sense to spend the amount. Basically, it used to be like a movie budget on each episode of that show. And it worked because this is the most successful TV show ever produced in the world, in the history of the world. That was then. Now, today, it's kind of normalized. Severance cost $20 million an episode. You go, wait a minute, it's a bunch of people in an office. How's that $20 million an episode? Okay, but the show wins awards. So, okay, fine. It's a prestige program for Apple. Then you look at a show like Wednesday. At $20 million an episode, the second season of Wednesday is definitely worse than the first season. Everybody universally agrees on that. It's still working. Netflix is still getting an audience for it, so you can make the case. But then when you get to something like The Last Airbender, you go, hang on, this is out of control. No one's watching this show. It's not a good show. It's not worth $20 million an episode. And it's not limited to live action, just to be clear. If you go to the next slide, Arcane is a fantastic program. If you haven't seen it, I totally encourage you to watch it. It's a great show. It shows you what's possible in streaming if you have an unlimited budget. They spent $260 million to produce 2 seasons of this show. That averages out to be about $13 million an episode, for which they were paid by Netflix a $3 million license fee per episode. So they lost $10 million an episode on this entire season, on this entire show. It's a great show because so much money was burned in the process. The point I'm making is simple. The cost structure is bloated and it's out of control. And that is one reason why they're slashing production. There's a second reason, which is that audiences are migrating to new platforms. Audiences are migrating to YouTube. Anybody under the age of 30 does not watch broadcast TV. They don't know what CBS and NBC stand for. It's not part of their world. So when you look at these two things, YouTube and TV, which one makes more money? Now, you might think it's television, right? That's the prestige brand. If you're an advertiser, that's where you want to put your dollars to work because you're going to garner a big audience fast. Not true. Netflix out-earns all broadcast TV in the United States. It's astonishing, and that's not all. It's the #1 streaming app in every country in the world by a long shot. We always think that Netflix, or maybe people think Disney Plus is #1. That is not true. In every market in the world, Netflix is #1 as a video app. It's the #1 VOD service on connected TV. So it's not like people are streaming on their phone or tablet. Of course, they're doing that with Netflix, but they're also watching it in the living room. And this is actually cutting into TV time. It's actually disrupting the TV business. Part of the success of YouTube is based on Google's ad stack. They have the best performance ad platform in the world, and no TV company can possibly compete with this. So they're doing very well by monetizing premium display advertising, turning it into performance. That's a conversion that only Google can do. Don't forget also, Google's #1 search engine, but the #2 search engine is not Bing. The #2 search engine on the web is YouTube. So if your show is not on YouTube, it doesn't exist as far as a whole generation goes that are using YouTube for search. And the key point here and why they can outcompete TV is that they get more than 600 hours of content uploaded every minute of the day, 24 hours a day, every day of the week, and they don't pay for any of it. So you have a perfect storm. You've got a business model for television, for traditional TV. The revenue is collapsing, the costs are out of control, and you have powerful new competitors who can undercut them. It seems to me this would be a perfect time to find a new technology that can radically reduce the cost of programming, right? It would seem like a perfect time for that. I'm not the only one who says that. If you think of Jeffrey Katzenberg, when he was at Disney, Jeffrey Katzenberg was the guy who put the mouse in Mauschwitz. He is famously the creator of 2 animation studios. And just around the time when I was raising money, it was quite helpful for me because he was out there saying the same thing to the group of people I was talking to in Singapore. He said, in the past, in the good old days, it took 500 animators 5 years to make a world-class animated feature. And 3 years from now, I don't think it'll take 10% of that. And he's exactly right. It's a very good forecast. Today, my company can produce a half-hour TV for 10% of the cost of traditional television. And we're just getting started. Like, that's going to go down over time. You're going to see a radical reduction in cost. That's what it's going to take. So it came as a surprise to some folks who care about writers and artists that there was a massive strike in 2023. It was like the exactly wrong time, just before this wave of disruption hit. All these guys went on strike, and the strike, as you remember, was very is filled with acrimony. People were very upset. They're still angry about it. It was not a good strike in the sense that it took forever, many months, about 6 months, more than that actually. So people burned through their life savings in order to stay on the strike line. The directors caved first. The writers held out. They always do. And the screen actors had solidarity with them, but it shut the entire industry down. The industry has not recovered since that time. So that was like a real low water mark for the whole media industry. And people were quite upset. And some people still blame the writers for this, but that's not really true. In fact, they had no choice. So the writers and the other guilds, they had no choice because their union contracts with the studios were up for renewal. And they had to do something because the deal that they were offered was terrible. And candidly, after the strike, the deal they got was a little better, but still wasn't great. The increase in rates didn't even keep up with inflation. The biggest issue in my mind here, though, is the mentality and the mindset. And I talked to a lot of people. I know a lot of people in the guilds, and I talked to people as they were striking, and they would say ChatGPT is a plagiarism machine, and AI steals from us, and it's going to disrupt us. There's all that kind of thinking. It's, to me, kind of fuzzy logic. These are people that don't really understand with great clarity how these systems work. And so they're resistant to it. They're fearful of it. They feel like it's been trained on their work, and therefore somehow that's a bad thing. It's going to take something away from them. That resistance is a defect. That lack of curiosity is going to hurt people. What I try to tell everybody in the industry is now is a great time to dip your toe in the ocean of generative artificial intelligence so that you can get familiar with it and develop your own workflow and figure out how to use the stuff to make something that people actually want to watch. The people who are best equipped to do that, candidly, are the people in the guilds, but the membership of the guild has to follow what the guild leaders say, and the guild leaders are telling them right now, AI is your enemy. They're being conditioned to believe that. And so I'm not so concerned about the last strike. I'm worried about the next strike, which comes in 18 months. When that union contract lapses, every media company is going to come to that next round of negotiations with artificial intelligence already in deployment. They're already going to know what the workflows are. They're already going to have tested it out. They're going to know what they want to do. And the guilds are going to be sitting there with their arms crossed going, no, we don't want to use AI. We don't know how to use it. It's not for us. And that is going to be a disaster. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. So I'm worried about the guilds. But candidly, I think that mentality spans this entire city. I love Los Angeles. I've been here for 30 years. I've worked at the forefront of media, as Michael mentioned. I've worked for major media companies and disruptive small tech companies. I've started companies all over the world. I've launched 25 networks in different parts of the world. I've launched game platforms and streaming platforms in 35 countries around the world. I care deeply about the media business. And when I come back to Los Angeles, I find this town is stuck in time. It's almost like they're trying to fight the future and claw their way back into the 1900s. That's a real problem. That's the wrong attitude to have. What I encourage people to do is to consider a path forward. And I see two paths forward, just two. I believe every person in this room and every person in this town, in this industry, is going to have to figure out how to deal with generative AI because it's coming so quickly. There's really only two ways to do that. One is to use generative AI to kind of reinforce the old method, right? To just bolt it on here and there on the sides and the periphery and somehow streamline the process of making a movie. And you hear that quite a lot when you talk to directors. They look at generative AI as maybe a way to kind of reduce the cost of special effects or use fewer human beings in the post-production process. And they're not wrong about that. My issue with that is that that's just a stepping stone to the next thing, which everybody is going to do. And I'm already there, which is to jettison the old thing and start completely fresh with a completely different mindset. Say, well, what happens when you move generative AI to the center of production? How does that change things? What new opportunities arise? What new jobs are going to be created? These are the questions we need to be asking ourselves right now. Okay, here's my example. 100 years ago, this is what an auto assembly line looked like. This is the Henry Ford plant at River Rouge, 1920s. A bunch of guys on a line, and what was innovative about Henry Ford's assembly line is that the workers stayed in one place and the car came to them. It was different from the way they used to make it bespoke, like an old-fashioned, carriage for a horse where one person would work on the whole thing. Instead, you specialized, and then the car came to you and you would bolt that part on or weld that part on or something. That's the assembly line. That's 1926. Here's an assembly line auto plant today. And truly, if you go around the world, there are no human workers in the body plants in any auto factory anymore. They're all made by robots. There are humans in the finish plant because humans still do the stitching on the seats and the upholstery. And so fine, the finish, that work is done by humans. But inside the body plant, there's no humans. In fact, these robots move so fast that they actually can kill humans. They've killed human workers in Japan and the US and Europe. So they are quite dangerous. That's why they put cages around them. So you can think of an auto body plant really as a giant machine. You put parts in one end and out the other end comes a finished auto chassis. That's 100 years of progress. Now, that was disruptive to auto workers. There's no question about it. But remember, when we talk about job loss and job creation and job destruction, which are themes that have been coming up all day today at this event and all week, you have to remember the only way to increase wages paid to workers, the only non-inflationary way to increase wages is to destroy jobs. I know that sounds terrible when I put it that way, but that's what automation is. We have 300 years of history in the Industrial Revolution that shows that unlocks tremendous productivity gains, and those productivity gains are what creates the pool of profit that allows you to raise wages in a non-inflationary way. So now let's look at the movie business. Here's a motion picture set from the 1920s. So right around that time of the picture that I showed you just from Detroit of the Henry Ford plant, in the 1920s, this is what it looked like when you were shooting a film. Actually, it's the 1930s because they were doing sound. So it's a little bit less than 100 years ago. A lot of people stand around, a lot of specialized workers, kind of similar in a way to Henry Ford's auto assembly plant. Fast forward to today. What does a film set look like today? Let's see the robots. Oh, there's no robots. It's still a whole bunch of people standing around. They're not wearing suits, they're wearing black t-shirts, but there's a lot of people. In fact, there's more people today than ever before. So we're going the wrong direction. We have a labor-intensive industry with a very high fixed cost, and we're adding more workers to that. Next slide. The average number of workers on a crew, on a film crew, has increased by a factor of 50% in just one decade. But if you take this chart all the way back to the 1990s, it's actually doubled and doubled. So we're adding more workers, and it gets even worse. Next slide. Take the Avatar, one of the most successful films in history. And it had a crew of 1,700 people that worked for 12 years on a budget of almost $500 million. This is an enormous undertaking. This is like a factory of people making a single motion picture. And funny enough, this isn't even the high watermark. If you consider those films like the Marvel superhero movies by Disney, they typically have more than 3,000 people in the credits. This is out of control. If you can't get this labor cost under control, these companies are not going to be able to compete. You can't just keep adding costs infinitely. So what happens when you make generative AI your friend and not your enemy? Well, you get a great creative collaborator. I think if you use, I'm sure half the people in this room use Gen AI every single day, and you can do it. You can use it as a kind of research assistant. Sometimes it's like a really clever assistant. Sometimes it's a mildly untrustworthy assistant, so you have to check it out and double check its work. What I believe is that the human artist is always going to have a role. Someone has to tell that thing what to do and what to go find and what to make, and they also have to decide whether or not the work is any good. Those are jobs for humans, discernment and figuring out what the next thing is and whether it's any good. But here's one of the big unlocks with Gen AI, and this is what my company's fully focused on. We want to answer the question of what does a production look like when it's fully dematerialized, starting with the script all the way through pre-production and visualization and live action production or principal photography through post-production, editing, sound design, and so forth. What happens if all of that has AI at the center of it? And what happens is you get this great unlock. You have an option to use no cast, no crew, no camera, no set, no soundstage. I know that sounds pretty radical. We're not there yet. I mean, that's not happening tomorrow, but that's a possibility. And that is the way you can produce a motion picture for 10% of the cost. Meanwhile, the quality level of Gen AI keeps going up. How many people use Gen AI to create pictures or video in this room? Okay, so good. Half the people in the room, you're all familiar with it. I don't have to sell you on it. You notice this improves at a blistering rate. We heard earlier that progress happens weekly in the space. It's absolutely true. I have a full-time crew that just benchmarks AI models every single week for text, for pictures, for sound, and for video, because they're improving at such a rapid clip. The intense competition, not just among the technology companies in California, but also between the American companies and the Chinese companies elsewhere in the world, and the competition between closed proprietary software and open source. This is a multi-factor competition that is accelerating innovation and quality improvement. So today, is the quality of generative AI the same as a motion picture? Of course not. Of course not. No one would make that claim. But it's a hell of a lot better than it was 2 years ago. And you can just project forward 2 more years. At this rate of innovation, it's going to be extremely compelling and very cheap. So the big fuss a couple weeks ago in the Hollywood Reporter and here in LA, because a very clever marketer in the UK introduced something new, a virtual character, a synthetic actor named Tilly Norwood. She doesn't exist. She is an AI actor, whatever that means. And people went bananas. I mean, like, it was in the front page of the Hollywood Reporter and Variety every single day, as if this was like sort of an existential threat. Now, first of all, it doesn't exist and no one's using it. So it's like, hold your horses, people, don't panic. But more importantly, it raises a really interesting question. To my mind, when I read about it, I was like, at what point will audiences accept a totally synthetic character? And I just showed you a picture of Avatar. Right? And Avatar is like, well, that wasn't really live action. That was a kind of like animated live action hybrid thing. And nobody batted an eye. 300 million people a month play games like League of Legends, which have no real actors, but they got a lot of synthetic actors, and they seem to find that just fine. If you watch Lord of the Rings, most of the characters in those films were generated. They were done with CGI, not with AI, but nevertheless, they weren't real actors. So the point here is that we're gradually being conditioned to accept synthetic actors. And it's not freaking people out. Here's my forecast. By 2028, every motion picture and television show will use generative AI in its production process. Audiences will not be able to detect the difference, and they will not care. They will not care if the actor is a real person or an AI. In fact, I think you're going to start to see fans emerge for synthetic characters who can respond to them in a personalized way, in a way that human actors never could. I get that that's very unsettling for motion picture actors, so I understand the concerns there. Can you help me? Thanks. Here's my take. I don't think AI is going to replace artists. If you're above the line, I think there's going to be a role for you in the future. And all the tools that we're building are designed for that, for people who make creative decisions. You'll have, instead of a cast and a crew, you'll probably have a series of, let's say, nested, persistent agents that you can talk to who will obey your commands. There will be roles for other humans there as well. So creative artists are still going to have an opportunity. But I don't think you're going to need a movie studio. And the more I think about it, the more I think about these gigantic land, lots of land with these sound stages filled with equipment that's very quickly obsolete. And I start thinking, wow, that is a very bad business to be in right now. I don't see how these things survive. They can jettison all that and become virtual studios. And trust me, these companies have been around for 100 years. They're the investment banks of the creative industry. They're going to find a way to survive. So don't worry. Don't lose sleep over Warner Brothers or Disney. They're going to be around. The key thing here, though, is if you can produce anywhere, then you don't have to produce here. And California is very, very expensive. To hire an AI engineer in San Francisco, I pay double what I would pay for an AI engineer in Montreal or any place in Europe, and the quality is just as good. So you have to really care a lot about California to decide to put up with the regulations, the taxes, the burdensome red tape, and all the rest of the issues in this city, in this state. Meanwhile, I've got my team is operating in 9 countries. This is a company that's only 18 months old. And that's what I think a future movie studio is going to look like. It'll be regional collaboration around the world. And we're building our tools designed that way to support decentralized creation. That's a radical concept. It's not entirely new because they've been doing this with sound and music for a very long time. And of course, there are many productions that travel around the world. But here what I'm saying is that you can actually have your team from the outset dispersed around the world, and that's going to create opportunity everywhere else. Now, today, international TV is dominated by American exports. You might not be aware of that because not that many people deal with international TV. Most of us watch TV in the United States. But if you go to any other country in the world, you're going to see TV shows that have been dubbed into the local language with actors from Southern California. And it is a little weird to be in like Bangkok or Colombo, Sri Lanka, and like you see TV shows on the air. You're like, wait, that's a show that was shot in Los Angeles. It seems a little odd to me. That's still the case. That's mostly just momentum and legacy. I think that's going to change. Because companies like mine, and there are hundreds of competitors, are going to build tools that make it possible for anybody anywhere to develop their own TV show. And get this. Thanks. The next bit is amazing. Hyper-localization, the ability to dub into any language. You heard about it today. You heard about it from one of the speakers earlier. He's already building an avatar of Michael that can speak 20 different languages, right? Michael doesn't speak 20 languages, but his AI avatar does. The future stars are going to have versions of themselves that are fluent in every language. This is actually kind of a radical notion. It starts to bend your idea of what an actor is, and it begins to bend the idea of what authorship is. It's like co-creation distributed around the world. This notion of decentralized creation is a very profoundly important one. What it means for Los Angeles is Los Angeles today is Detroit in 1975. We have no idea what's about to hit us. But when all those revenue streams from international distribution begin to dry up and disappear because people are making their own shows in their own language with their own characters that look and sound and feel like them, that's going to create a huge problem for us. We're going to have to get a lot more nimble, a lot more lean, and we're going to have to compete a lot harder to maintain the ascendancy. Now, today, it's 1,000 to 1. The United States exports 1,000 shows compared to any other country except for the UK. Maybe they export UK exports maybe a couple hundred shows, and the rest of the countries, it's under 100 shows a year. So the United States still dominates, but how long is that going to last? I don't think it's going to last very long. This hyper-localized notion is a big, big idea. The second thing, and really the last point I have for you, is that there's going to be a tsunami of video created. Now, you might already think, well, wait a minute, isn't that what YouTube is? 600 hours a minute is being uploaded. That's nothing compared to what's coming. If you've used the new Sora app, you know exactly what I mean. Millions of people are generating videos. They're kind of mindlessly doing it. It's like eating Pringles potato chips. It's addictive and it's fun. It's hard to stop doing it. You just click a button and it generates more. That's kind of a fun thing to do. Those aren't necessarily good videos, but the ability to build good narratives that are entertaining is going to be so widely distributed that we are going to have a flood of content. And that brings me to another idea then. You go, wow, if it's decentralized, if distribution is decentralized, how do you find shows? It'll be a needle in the haystack problem. And that's where agentic AI brings in a really interesting distribution idea. And this is where I can finally link all this back to Tokenize, please. So it's not news for you to know that attention is the scarcest commodity, right? If you're watching free video on TV or a free streaming show, guess what? You're not the customer. You're the product. Your eyeballs are being sold to advertisers, right? So that is an attention market. Now let's flip to the next bit because I want to talk about attention markets for a second. So in the world of media, we sometimes think about these marketplaces where you gather a lot of eyeballs around a show and then you resell those eyeballs to advertisers. That was originally the principle behind TV, and it still works for something like the Super Bowl. But increasingly, those dollars are fleeing to digital platforms, and where they're going is the places where they perform the best. Money always loves to flow where it's treated best. And right now, where it's treated best are two companies. This is the most centralized industry on the planet Earth, attention markets. There are two. They're both being reviewed right now for antitrust violations and market control, price fixing, and so forth. Of course, they're Google and Meta. Those are the two companies I'm referring to. And this is the thing to smash. I'm not interested in smashing motion picture companies. I am very interested in smashing this. This is a great opportunity to shift the balance of power. These two companies command a great deal of attention because they command the attention from audiences. So they command attention from advertisers and marketers and sponsors because they control the biggest attention markets on the planet Earth. What happens if this gets decentralized? Next. So I want to go back to an idea that's not new. But Michael said, how does all this stuff get tokenized? And I was like, actually, there was a really cool idea in 2017 during that ICO boom. Maybe you remember the basic attention token. came out of the gate like a bat out of hell. It sold out in 30 seconds flat, right? So that was great, but that was a very thinly traded offering. And since then, they've run into all sorts of problems. Principally, their problem is they're up against Google and Meta. So they're trying to take on the two biggest monopolies on the planet Earth. That's a tough battle. It's still there. It still sort of works. They got some things right. I think now, 7 years later, we could revisit that idea. What happens if you have audiences that are loyal to a show, super fans that you reward with tokens for watching the show, and you give them a chance to actually earn some of the money that's being generated by that show, and give them a chance to redeem that for rewards that they might like, or trade them with other people, or maybe even give them to creators and help fund creation. In fact, why not allow them to invest in new show production so that they can actually put that money to work? Why not? Why is that not possible? I think entirely this room has the capability of figuring out how to do it. Next slide. So for a long time, even when I worked for Oprah, we used to say engagement is the new entertainment, and that's going to be increasingly true because fans are not loyal. Audiences are fickle. People could cancel and unsubscribe fast. Lots of people do it. You know, when the Olympics is on NBC, a whole bunch of people sign up for Peacock for 1 month for free, and then they cancel their subscription at the end of the month. It's a terrible business for NBC, but that's not our problem. The point is that audiences are fickle. How do you keep them engaged? Next slide. Tokens. Tokens are going to be the new measurement medium. Yeah, for 7 years, there's been a debate about how accurate are Nielsen ratings, and the answer is they're not. It's a conspiracy between content publishers, and they all collude on this idea that we're going to create an artificial currency, a measurement system that's not based on anything in reality, and we're going to sell that to advertisers. And if everybody's selling the same metrics, well, then the industry kind of works, and that's how television has operated. Tokens are objectively measurable, and they can be redeemed, and therefore they're valuable. And I think that's going to emerge as an opportunity. That's it for me for now. Last slide. Thank you. So I'm Rob Tercek, the author of Vaporize. Thank you all very much for attending and listening. I think it's time for lunch.
And eyes wide open on this one. This was really an amazing presentation. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
You know, if there's how many billions of people in the world? 8 billion people. Every year they have 365 days and about 8 hours of time. Like, at what point does attention just get completely evaporated?
Depends how you look at it. You can say it's happening now, right? My feeling is you can always squeeze a little more video in there. People always have a few more minutes they can peel off and watch a video. Have you followed the trend of microdramas? Are you familiar with that term, or what they call verticals? So these are little 1-minute videos that play like basically, imagine if you took a telenovela or a soap opera and then took all the air out of it and compressed it down into 1 minute. So you take a half-hour episode and shrink it down. So it's just pure plot. You know, there's no character, very little dialogue. They're incredibly addictive. Real Shorts is one, but there's like 16 companies that are producing these. And bear in mind, this is the fastest growing segment of the TV business right now in China. The microdrama business is now generating close to $8 billion. It's more than box office in China. And in the United States, those 16 companies I referred to that are producing these microdramas, they're generating close to $1.6 billion. So this is a big business, and many, many people in this town are aware of it, and they're trying to pivot to it. It's just that the cost of production is low. They're not using union actors. Like, they're slashing costs. Typically what they spend is they try to spend $1,000 an episode to produce those. And frankly, that's my benchmark. I'm trying to get there with Gen AI so that I can compete with them with better visuals. That's actually a really good reference point. But here's another thing to think about. This came to my attention because the woman I live with loves Wednesday, and she's a teacher, so she really likes the idea that shows in school. I know if you haven't watched it, it's a bunch of guys. Of course, you haven't seen it. But it's the Addams Family character, Wednesday Addams, and it's her life in a boarding school. The first season was very clever. It was directed by Tim Burton, who's a great director. It was beautiful, and it's a high-budget show. So we were looking forward to the second season, and halfway through, I'm like, I can't watch this. It's so stupid. It's so poorly written. Why is this show driving me so nuts? So I started to read on the web, why is Wednesday such a bad show? And actually, it turns out there's a lot of stuff on Reddit where people are writing about this. Here's one fact I did not know, blew my mind. So one of the most annoying things about the show is that the characters always tell you what they just did. This is one of the attributes of this current season. Now remember, this is a major flagship show for Netflix, right? So this is not some like incidental show on the side. This is a $20 million an episode show with a lot of A-list talent on it. Netflix sent notes to the producer of the show and to the writers and said, you need more exposition. The dialogue has to have more exposition. Now that is like breaking one of the cardinal rules of screenwriting, because screenwriting is the art of show, don't tell, right? So you don't have characters tell you what they did. But if you watch Wednesday, if you can stand watching an episode, you'll see scenes where the characters come rushing in and they say, we were just at the graveyard and the werewolves showed up. And you're like, well, I know, I'm watching the show. I saw that scene. It happened a minute ago. Like, what? But the reason they're doing it, and the reason Netflix sent that out, Netflix knows what they're doing. They sent that memo out to the producers because everyone watching that show is a 16-year-old girl, and they're all looking at this. So when they hear that, they look up at the show. Now, this is really, really important. 10 years ago, there was this big debate in Los Angeles about what's the first screen and what's the second screen. The TV people were like, we're the first screen. We're always going to be the first screen. I got news for you. TV is no longer the first screen. And what that tells me is that Netflix is in big trouble. Right? If they can't maintain energy, if they can't produce shows that are compelling enough to keep people watching the shows, you're already paying for the service. But they can't maintain that attention because people are distracted, right? And they're probably watching YouTube, or maybe they're watching reel shorts on their phone while they're watching shows on Netflix. That's what's happening. So you can actually consume 2 TV shows at the same time. You're only limited by the number of screens you have. Any other questions, or should we go eat? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentations. Very engaging, and it caught my attention.
I'm glad to hear.
For all of us. I had 2 questions. The strike that you were saying that's impending in 18 months, what strike was that? And the second question is...
The Guild union contracts are 3 years long. And so the last contract was 2023. So we're about halfway through that cycle. They'll be up for renewal in 3 years, in 18 months or thereabouts. You know, it's going to vary because the deal's closed at different times, but roughly speaking, about 18 months from now. Anyway, both sides are already gearing up for that. And what I'm seeing is that the union approach is no, and the studio approach is hell yeah when it comes to AI. And that's going to be an ugly battle.
Right. And the second question is there currently a platform that can often tokens for engagement?
So the only one I'm aware of, but trust me, this is not my expertise, this is not what I'm working on, is the basic attention token, which is connected to the Brave browser. And if you haven't seen it, it's quite an elegant idea. And it came out of the gate with a boom because they had a super successful ICO. So a lot of people who bought that ICO are bummed out because the price dropped, like all ICOs of that era dropped over time. So a lot of people are like, screw it, it's junk, it's not worth it. But they're missing the point. It's still working. Brave browser is a good browser. It's a privacy first browser. You get rewarded with tokens for watching. You don't earn that many, so it's maybe not that great of an ecosystem. That's where they failed. But remember, they're taking on Meta and Google. This is a little tiny startup company. It doesn't matter how successful their ICO was. That's a tough job. You're talking about 2 entrenched monopolies that are absolutely ruthless about crushing and wiping out competition. So they're trying to make that stillborn. So that doesn't sound very encouraging, does it, when I say it that way? But I think there's a really good opportunity here. And the simple fact is that we are going to be awash in content. Right. So in the old days, we used to say content is scarce, content is king, content is priceless. That's why the studios are so focused on copyright protection for all their products. Right. They're very focused on keeping the scarce product well guarded, but they're missing the point. Content is going to be free. Like the cost of creating content is going to go down in line linearly with the cost of compute, which is going down, right? It's even going down faster than Moore's law. Some people say the cost of compute for generative AI is going down at a factor of 100% a year. I don't see it that way myself, but it's over maybe a couple of years. Sure, it's on that trend. The point is that the cost today is cheap. It's going to keep getting cheaper. So content will eventually be free, which means content is going to be marketing. Like the idea of having a show and then selling advertising, it's going to be one thing. It has to be. It's the only possible solution. So now what's scarce is going to become the attention of the audience. So who gets paid? When you have the scarce commodity, you should get paid as a viewer. You ought to get paid. No one's focused on that right now. If I were running an ad agency, or if I were one of these big holding companies like WPP, or Omnicom, that's what I'd be thinking about right now is, gee, maybe we should shift our model from thinking that content is scarce to thinking actually audience and attention is scarce. The scarcest thing by far is loyalty. And in terms of loyalty programs that use tokens, of course those exist. And they're very, very successful. They may not all be in the United States because frankly, the regulatory environment pre-Trump wasn't very favorable, but they're prospering in other markets around the world. And this is a big, fat, juicy market. So you might imagine then that a loyalty-based token is going to somehow emerge as a new ad platform or some way to reward people for attention. I think that's a very likely possibility.
Thank you.
Not my expertise. Yeah, in the back.
Want to give it a second?
Yeah, it's a whole different conversation. We're going to run out of time. It's a big topic. Yeah, we can talk about that. They talk about price to perfection. Oh my God. Like if you're a fan right now, you get penalized 3 times if you want to watch this one season. It's a terrible situation. Anybody else? Quick question? Yeah, go. Oh, so with the agreement of my co-founders, we're not talking about any release plans. I'm not talking about the product. I can't. I'm sorry. I know that's a terrible answer. But I didn't come here to talk about it. When we release it, you will hear about it. Trust me, it will be unstoppable at that point.